Mia sat nervously in the quiet corner of the private club's lounge, clutching the crisp invitation in her hands. The card had an elegant gold border, embossed with the club's emblem, a detail that didn't quite match how out of place she felt. The invitation was for the afternoon karate class, an event she hadn't expected to attend, especially since she was just the club secretary. Usually, her days were filled with answering calls and managing schedules, not facing a room of sharp-eyed club members and an instructor known for his biting remarks. The dojo was an expansive, minimalist space within the club, with polished wooden floors and mirrors lining the walls. As Mia entered, she noticed the familiar faces of some club elites, their confident postures highlighting her own hesitance. Victor, the karate instructor, stood near the center of the room, tall and imposing in his crisp gi. His sharp eyes flicked over the newcomers and landed on her with a glint that made her stomach twist. As everyone's noticed, we have a new participant today, Victor announced with a smirk that barely hid his amusement. Mia, our ever-dutiful secretary, here to show us if anyone can really throw a punch or if she's just here for the laughs. Laughter rippled through a small group nearby, though some cast uneasy glances toward Mia. She swallowed hard, her cheeks burning, but she forced herself to nod. This was her moment, whether she liked it or not. The subtle tension in the air tightened as the class began, all eyes narrowing on Mia, the unexpected guest who'd just been put on a stage she wasn't sure she could handle. Victor's smirk deepened as he stepped closer to Mia, his tone deliberately slow and dripping with condescension. "All right, Mia, let's see if you can at least manage the basic stance. Don't worry if you stumble. Some people haven't exactly been built for this." The warm sunlight filtering through the dojo windows made Mia's skin glow but did nothing to ward off the prickle of shame crawling up her neck. She planted her feet firmly, recalling the handful of karate classes she had taken years before. Her muscles tensed, memories flickering of precise moves she once mastered in secret. But now, surrounded by self-assured club members, many of whom judged her by her modest attire and unassuming presence, she hesitated. Victor circled the class like a shark, his eyes sharp for any sign of weakness. When Mia executed a punch, it was sluggish and lacked snap, eliciting a few snickers from the sidelines. "That's adorable," Victor said, loud enough for all to hear, his voice slicing through the hum of whispered comments. "Looks like our secretary's better at filing papers than throwing punches." Mia glanced at the other members. Some tried to conceal their smiles, embarrassed by Victor's cruelty. Others exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain whether to laugh or look away. A young woman named Clara, seated near the edge of the room, caught Mia's eye and gave a quiet nod of encouragement. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt like a lifeline. Victor was relentless. He assigned Mia the most complicated combinations, twisting stances, fast kicks. Each time Mia faltered, his jab came sharper, his tone bordering on mockery. "Maybe we should stick to typing classes, Mia," he said with a cruel grin. "Karate might be a bit out of your league." Mia's frustration grew, but something sharper still propelled her onwards, the broader silence of the room, the anticipation written on every face. She felt trapped, as if all eyes were set on her to fail spectacularly. The lines between embarrassment, anger, and determination blurred. Despite her best efforts, one swift kick caused her to wobble, nearly losing balance. A few members stifled laughter, the sound harsh against the dojo's calm. Victor barked an order for her to try again. "No quitting, secretary. Prove you're worth the invite." The word stung, but the real wound was the doubt, whether in herself or seated by those watching. As sweat beaded on her brow, she thought about stepping back, wiping away the humiliation and slipping quietly out of the room. Instead, she took a deep breath, focusing on the practiced breathing techniques she had learned long ago. After class members began pairing off for sparring, Victor singled Mia out again. "Let's see what happens when you have to actually defend yourself. Don't worry, if you mess up, we'll make it a group show." The group parted, gazes fixated on Mia and Victor. Her heart hammered in time with every step she took to the center. The feeling was suffocating, the air thick with anticipation and doubt. Each second stretched longer, as if the room itself challenged her resolve. Victor's approach was aggressive, aimed to intimidate rather than guide. He delivered a test strike, expecting Mia to crumble. But the moment he launched forward, something shifted. Mia sidestepped smoothly, not perfectly, but with enough control to avoid an embarrassing fall. Gasps escaped some of the onlookers. The unexpected movement arrested the flow of ridicule. Murmurs replaced snickers as Mia steadied herself, exchanging a glance with Clara, whose expression had softened considerably. Victor stepped back, momentarily silent beneath the quiet gaze of observers. Then, with a sharp nod, he commanded, "All right, secretary. Let's not get complacent yet. Show me your best." The challenge hung in the air, heavier this time with genuine expectation. Mia felt the sting of every stare, but a spark lit within her. There was more at stake than pride. This was a chance to rewrite the scene that Victor and the club had set. Still, doubt whispered at the edges of her mind. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the club's laughter couldn't be outrun? But beneath it all was the pulse of a secret she had kept for years, something Victor and the curious crowd hadn't yet seen. The room watched, waiting for her next move, as if the silence itself contained the possibility of change. As the expectant silence settled over the dojo, Mia squared her shoulders and took a steadying breath. The memory of countless hidden hours spent training flickered vividly through her mind. Long before she wore the simple secretary's blouse and slacks, before the quiet routine of her club job, karate had been the essence of who she truly was. Now, beneath the weight of scrutiny, that part of her was ready to emerge. She shifted into a formal kata stance, her posture perfectly aligned, muscles relaxed but alert. The move seemed to surprise even herself, the flow of each motion smooth and precise, her arms slicing the air with deliberate power. The room's previous chatter and laughter fell away, replaced by an attentive hush. For moments that stretched, she ceded to the rhythm that had once been second nature. Victor's eyes narrowed, his bravado faltering as he watched Mia execute a complex sequence, one that demanded physical dexterity, mental focus, and years of discipline. Her kicks struck with accuracy and grace, her punches punctuated by the strength of a practiced hand. The silence around her grew palpable, and a few gasps punctuated the quiet. Some members shifted in their seats, clearly unprepared for the display. When the final movement ended, Mia held her stance for a brief second, breathing steady and even. Then she relaxed, turning to meet the eyes of the club members. Whispers began to ripple through the group, disbelief mixed with admiration. Some faces wore sheepish expressions, others more openly impressed. The club, for once, was silent, not with derision, but with respect. Victor stepped forward slowly, the smirk gone from his lips, replaced by a mask of uncertainty. "Impressive," he said quietly, perhaps more to himself than anyone else. Then, louder, he admitted something rare: "I underestimated you, Mia." The effect was immediate. The momentum shifted as laughter that had earlier mocked her transformed into a wave of approval. Members who had laughed at her clumsiness now whispered words of praise. Clara, who had sat quietly at the edge of the room, smiled broadly and gave an encouraging clap. Others joined, hesitant at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Victor's position, once unquestionably dominant, wobbled under the weight of his changed demeanor. His usual sharp commands softened into tentative remarks aimed at Mia, no longer designed to provoke humiliation, but to engage. Mia felt a small surge of vindication but tempered it with modesty. This was not about forcing others to acknowledge her, it was about reclaiming a part of herself she had thought long buried under the club's expectations. Her gaze swept the room, locking briefly with Victor's, who avoided direct eye contact but nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you," Mia said quietly but firmly, her voice steady. "Karate has been part of my life for years, more than most here might have guessed." A few club members murmured questions, curiosity replacing skepticism. She smiled faintly, the secret she had guarded finally laid bare. Some members shifted in their seats, exchanging surprised glances. One older man, a gentler presence than Victor, commented, "You've got real talent, Mia. Thank you for sharing it with us today." With that, the atmosphere in the dojo transformed entirely. Victor signaled the class to resume, but the lessons felt different now, grounded in mutual respect rather than spectacle. Mia's presence had altered the dynamic irrevocably. As practice continued, she found herself taking a new role, not just a hesitant participant, but a leader, quietly guiding others through movements, her expertise shining with natural ease. For the first time, Victor wrestled with his own thoughts. The mocking instructor found himself unexpectedly humbled by someone he had misjudged. The lesson extended far beyond physical technique. It was about perception, respect, and the power of hidden strengths revealed. Mia's performance was more than a display of martial skill, it was a quiet reclaiming of identity. Those who had doubted her learned a lesson in humility, and the entire club witnessed a transformation that left the dojo buzzing, not with ridicule, but with admiration. As the echoes of applause began to fade and the dojo slowly returned to its usual rhythms, Mia remained poised amidst the shifting gazes of the club members. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in the air, and in that quiet moment, she allowed herself to share a glimpse of the story behind the unexpected strength they had just witnessed. "I didn't start karate just as a hobby," Mia began softly, eyes briefly downcast before meeting the expectant faces around her. "In fact, I was a competitor, a serious one. Years ago, I wrestled with injuries and challenges that made me step back. That's why I took this secretary position here at the club. I wanted a quieter life, a chance to heal and find balance." Luminescence from the afternoon sun filtered across the polished wooden floor, dust particles drifting lazily through the warm light as she spoke. The members listened, some leaning in with curiosity, others with a newfound respect that softened the lines of judgment they'd once drawn. Mia continued, her voice steady yet tinged with the vulnerability of her confession. "I chose not to wear any of my medals or showcase my past. It's not who I am day to day. Today's class was a shock for me, too." Victor's tone and the attention reminded me why I stepped away for a while. "It's not just physical strength, it's about courage and resilience." She glanced toward Victor, whose expression had shifted several times during her story, from surprise to reflection, finally settling into something quieter, almost regretful. Clara, sitting near the doorway, caught Mia's eye again and flashed a warm, encouraging smile. "Thank you for trusting us with that," she said softly, the vulnerability of Mia's tale resonating deeply in the room. Victor's posture stiffened, the tough instructor's mask briefly cracking. Clearing his throat, he addressed the room. "I suppose this is a reminder for all of us, not to underestimate others, and certainly not so casually." There was an unusual softness to his voice. Others nodded. Some exchanged glances laden with unspoken apologies. It was evident that the mocking atmosphere that had once been a trademark of Victor's classes was about to change, starting here, starting now. Mia's words had quietly opened a door. The club members began posing questions, not out of skepticism, but genuine interest. What had her training involved? How had she maintained her skills despite the distance? What had motivated her to quietly step away from competition? Each question was met with thoughtful answers that painted a richer, fuller picture of Mia's journey. Behind the simple secretary who had sat quietly at her desk for months was a woman shaped by discipline, sacrifice, and quiet determination, a life narrative that few had anticipated. Mia spoke about the choice of simplicity in dress and demeanor. When you're immersed in environments like this club, sometimes invisibility is the safest option. You don't want to be defined by your past, so you let the present speak for itself. Her voice carried a mix of resilience and humility, a balance that resonated deeply with those around her. Victor, now thoughtful, slowly softened toward his perspective. "Maybe I learned more than just karate moves today," he admitted. It's a lesson in respect and understanding that goes beyond physical skill. The atmosphere had shifted profoundly. Mia was no longer the timid outsider, she was a catalyst for change. The pride in her legacy mingled with the promise of new beginnings in this space. The club's quiet corners seemed less imposing now. The whispers of judgment faded beneath the possibility of genuine connection. She prepared to leave the dojo after class, her thoughts weaving between relief and anticipation. The question lingering quietly in her mind wasn't whether her skills offered validation, it was how this moment might alter relationships and perceptions yet to come. Would Victor's respect be genuine? How would the others embrace her in this new light? The day's events offered more than a physical display. They hinted at a transformation within the club's walls and within each person who had witnessed Mia's unveiling. With a final glance around the room, she felt a subtle surge of hope. Here was a chance to be seen fully, not just as a quiet secretary but as a whole person with talents, depths, and stories worthy of recognition. The future felt uncertain, yes, but also electric with possibility. In the days that followed Mia's remarkable display, the atmosphere within the club shifted palpably. Whispers of her skill and story circulated discreetly at first, then more openly. Members who had merely glanced her way with polite indifference now sought her out, eager to engage beyond the typical greetings exchanged in passing. Mia found herself no longer invisible but quietly admired, a transformation both subtle and profound. Victor's demeanor also evolved, though not without internal conflict. The once arrogant instructor began to approach Mia with measured respect, his biting remarks replaced by thoughtful observations. One afternoon, after class had concluded and the dojo was emptied except for the two of them, Victor finally voiced what many had been pondering. "I owe you an apology," he said, voice low and genuine. "I was wrong to assume you were just some secretary here to be humiliated. Your skill, your control, it's impressive. I let my arrogance blind me." Mia looked at him, noting the rare vulnerability in his eyes. "Thank you, Victor. It takes courage to admit when we misjudge others." He hesitated, then added, "If you're willing, I'd like to work with you to develop a training program inclusive of all skill levels. Something that encourages growth without ridicule." The sincerity in his words brought a flicker of hope to Mia's spirit. Such a shift promised more than just peace between them, it suggested a renewal for the club's entire martial arts community. Meanwhile, the club's management noticed the change. Conversations about the dojo and its classes took on a kinder tone. Some members, emboldened by Mia's example, stepped forward to try the class themselves, shedding old fears of inadequacy. And Victor's critics? They quieted swiftly, replaced by supporters intrigued by the new direction of his teaching style. The once cynical instructor began to regain genuine respect, not through domination but through empathy and collaboration. Among the club's elite, a small ceremony was arranged in subtle recognition of Mia's impact. Though she had not sought praise, the invitation surprised and touched her deeply. On the day, surrounded by familiar faces now tinged with admiration rather than judgment, she received a small, elegant plaque inscribed with words acknowledging both her skill and courage. But the true compensation lay not in the honor itself, but in the heartfelt words of those expressing regret for their earlier behavior. Clara, who had been among the first to encourage her, reflected quietly, "Seeing you today reminded me how easy it is to judge without understanding. You changed our perspective, Mia." The club's director, a composed woman named Louise, took Mia's hands gently. "We are fortunate to have you here. Your presence elevates our community." These moments filled Mia with a quiet satisfaction that transcended applause. She felt vindicated not merely by recognition but by the authentic connections forged through honesty and strength. Victor, too, seemed transformed. No longer the mocking antagonist, he was an ally, more mindful of the impact his words had on others. When their training sessions resumed, they worked side by side, each learning from the other. Mia's confidence deepened not because she had silenced her critics with skill alone, but because she embraced her full self, the woman who had walked through doubt and come out stronger. The dojo, once a place of guarded excellence, now welcomed all who yearned to grow, unburdened by fear or ridicule. As the weeks passed, Mia stood tall, her smile warm and genuine. Her journey had not ended with a single act of quiet triumph but continued with every challenge met and every connection made. She often thought about the moment she stepped into that class, when all eyes braced to laugh, and how that moment had blossomed into something far greater. It was a reminder that strength lies not just in striking hard but in standing firm, even when the world expects you to fall. To our viewers, if you found Mia's story inspiring, how would you have responded in her place? Or as Victor, facing your own moments of humility? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to join us for more stories of courage, resilience, and transformation. See you in our next story.